Democrats in the Roundhouse say a minimum wage of $8.50 an hour is about social justice. But the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce and other business groups says it simply drives up the cost of goods and services. So here to opine on a statewide minimum wage hike, former New Mexico House Republican Whip Dan Foley is here. Across the table from Dan, law professor at the University of New Mexico, Antoinette Cedillo Lopez returns. Former State Senator Dee Dee Feldman is back with us as well. And editor of the Capitol Report in New Mexico, Rob Nicoleski. Santa Fe has, listen, let me put it this way, guys. Santa Fe has done it. Albuquerque just did it. A bunch of cities and states across the country are doing it. But let me start with you, Rob. Let me start with this about evidence-based deals. Do people actually live better? Do we have information when a minimum wage goes up? And what do we know what's going on here?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. You know, the supporters of this say that there's a multiplier effect and people are going to have more money to spend and they'll immediately spend it. And critics are going to say that all you're doing is just artificially inflating things. And in a state where New Mexico is really struggling financially, how many more people or how many small businesses are going to say, you know, $8.50 an hour, I'm either not going to hire that extra person or I will hire that extra person but not give all the other employees a raise.
Right.
So that's what the debate's all about. The other thing too is if New Mexico goes to $8.50 minimum wage per hour, it'll be the fourth highest in the country. We're not talking 20th or 25th. We're talking fourth highest in the nation.
Fourth highest state on a statewide basis in the nation. Interesting. Senator Feldman, good to see you. Always great when you're here. The other side of this argument, it seems to me, or one of the other sides, is in Santa Fe there were predictions of calamitous results for business when their minimum wage went up to the second highest in the country behind San Francisco, I believe.
Alternating.
That's right.
I think San Francisco has some sort of provision that if some other city overtakes them, that they leapfrog over them. But Santa Fe's is going to go up to I think $10.31 an hour on,
I believe 1051 actually
on March 1st.
That's right. And so before that increase, there were predictions of direness for Santa Fe. It didn't necessarily happen.
It didn't pan out.
Right.
There's no evidence that the Chamber of Commerce is right on this one, that businesses will close. And you know, with low-wage employees, there's a high turnover. When you pay them more, they tend to stay, and that's an element of stability. But you know, when you talk about social justice, right now, folks that are making the minimum wage in New Mexico, they are below the poverty level, below the federal poverty level. They qualify for Medicaid. They qualify for other benefits. So I think that the converse is, in terms of social justice, you get people up to a living wage, they will be less dependent on the state government. So that's the other side of it.
Living in these terms, Dan, means a little over $17,000 a year. The old argument has always been minimum wage is not meant to be lived on. But a New Mexico reality is a lot of New Mexicans live on the minimum wage, or they try to. So what's wrong with giving people a little bit extra, another 50 cents, which could be worked out, I think, to another $40 a week for groceries and such? When you predict, what's the matter with that? Why can't people accommodate that?
Well, I think multiple reasons, okay? One of them is there's lots of evidence that this has been a problem for Santa Fe. It's been a huge problem amongst young people getting jobs. It's been a young problem amongst handicapped folks getting jobs, the people that you see working where an employer says, if I got to pay someone that much money, I'm not going to give these jobs to handicapped folks that we used to give them to. There was a study by the University of Kentucky that said the mentally handicapped in the city of Santa Fe are almost jobless. They can't find jobs in the city of Santa Fe. And so it's a huge problem, and there's much anecdotal evidence that shows you that. The problem is we keep having these social justice conversations about living wages, and I think taking someone from $7.50 an hour to $8 doesn't make them live any better. $40 a month in your pocket doesn't change you from the poverty level. If we're going to have these conversations,
but it does buy some groceries.
It does buy
put fuel in your tank. It does buy the time. Pay an emergency visit, perhaps somewhere with a copay. If you have lucky enough to have insurance. $40 is a lot of money.
No, Gene. What we know for a fact, Gene, not talking hypothetically, is that in lots of places these little bumps to these folks takes them out of government programs that they otherwise would have qualified for. So now instead of qualifying for Medicaid, they miss it by $10. They make $10 too much.
I've heard this. Yep.
And so then all of a sudden you got these people that don't have enough money to pay for insurance. The problem is if we're going to have this conversation, what is a living wage? Put people at that living wage. Minimum wage was intended for young people to get jobs to start. My dad used to say all the time, the best time to get a good job is to have a bad job. And what we wind up doing is you look at
How about when there's no jobs?
Well, you look at many people, many businesses today, Gene, small businesses, Burger Kings, McDonald's, they're barely at the cusp of staying profitable, barely at the cusp of keeping their doors open. You tell them you're going to raise their largest expense, which is wages, by 10 cents an hour to every employee. Now you've gone from just keeping the family business open to saying I'm scrapping the family business and I'm closing it. This is a bad deal.
Let me get to Antoinette here. I hear your point. You wouldn't be alone on this. That's not a single Dan Foley thought. But another point, Antoinette, on this also, as I go back to the Santa Fe example, there are plenty of small retailers out there who have stepped forward, in fact here in Albuquerque as well, and said, look, it's a good idea to pay your people well. They become better employees.
Exactly. And there's dignity to it, and then there's the incentive to get a job. I mean, for some people, why even bother to work? It's just not worth it. So that's another reason. But I think Mr. Foley, your point is correct about benefits. I think we need to be really careful to make sure that we don't make people not qualify for benefits by $10. And so I think there needs to be study about that. You know, what should this wage be?
Yeah, the other element to this as well, just thinking about this, is okay, if you've got a high minimum wage in Santa Fe, and let's say we bump it up to we've already got it $8.50 an hour in Albuquerque. But I don't know if Albuquerque really compares to Truth or Consequences or Gallup. I mean, if you're running a burger stand in Truth or Consequences, $8.50 an hour might be a little too much of a burden for you to end up hiring more people or hiring anybody at all.
But aren't there other factors to hiring besides a minimum wage, Senator? I mean, you know, you got to have income coming into. Nobody. It's like the analogy. Nobody hires on a tax break. Right? They hire with more business.
That's right.
So is this a moot issue if we turn this economy around?
Well,
could we handle $8.50 an hour statewide?
There's where you get to the multiplier. People have to have money in their pockets to spend, and a higher minimum wage will put $40 extra in their pockets. And you know, the other bill that's up there is the one that would simply provide a increase based on inflation and cost of living.
That's right.
And that one is it's a constitutional amendment that would go to the voters. The other one is a bill that I think would be subject to a gubernatorial veto.
Let's get right there, because that's the next part of it. I want to swing back to Rob here and then get around the table real quick. Actually, let me start with Dan, my fault. The idea of this going to the voters, the idea of what to do if you make a straight bill, goes to the governor, she could veto it, you're back at ground zero. But if this happens, it would come up on the 2014 ballot, which some people are saying could in fact help Democrats during that cycle. Do you buy that premise?
Well, clearly the minimum wage argument helps the Democrat Party. I mean, there's no evidence anywhere that Republicans roll out in droves and vote, you know, the minimum wage argument. You know, or against it. I think that at the end of the day, you know, if you want to make it political, you send it to the governor's desk. If you want to, quote unquote, try to take the politics out of it, is what we're being told. I think it's even more political to put it on as a constitutional amendment, because now you're going to bring in every grassroots organization, every labor organization, everybody that's going to have boots on the ground that are going out to vote, and try to get them out to vote for this single issue. We see how it was overwhelmingly won in Albuquerque. I mean, it was a resounding victory in Albuquerque.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so there's no denying it. But I think the problem.
Would you predict a victory for it if it went to a statewide?
I think it might be. I'm not sure about that. Okay. I think it'll do well in Albuquerque, but I think in rural New Mexico, where people I think are more in tune with, you know, working at the ranch, working at the family business, it may not have the same effect.
Antoinette, you disagree with that?
I disagree. I think that if it's on the ballot, people will vote with their pocketbooks, and they will vote for it.
It's a cost of living increase. It's not an absolute number.
Yeah, but we got to remember that when
we
start doing, we got to remember when we do this.
I'm down to under a minute. Let me finish up on this one. On the politics of it. Sorry, Dan, but on the politics of it, who needs to get out front here? Because Senator Keller's been out front on this. We've got certainly our Senate Majority Leader has been out front of this. But then after that, I haven't heard a whole lot of voices really being strong on this.
Well, I think the Democrats are pretty strong on this. I mean, they're covering the legislature so far this session. They're having weekly news conferences. I don't remember them doing that. So yeah, I think they think it's a winner issue. The only other thing I'd add to this is that if you're going to have the debate about this, well, if it's great to increase a minimum wage by $1, would it be greater to increase it by $2.
Sure.
Even fantastic at $3. I don't know where the logic
let me ask you that
is.
straight question. And we know where your side of the bagel is buttered, and that's fine on these issues of policy for money. But would that in fact happen, in your view? Would we be better off with a $2 or $3 increase on the minimum? What's the downside of that?
Because this is an argument if you believe the government should be artificially enforcing wages on folks and businesses.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is, here's a perfect example. We can end with this, Gene. Go to the drive-thru at McDonald's in Santa Fe. There's no dollar menu on the drive-thru at McDonald's. There's a dollar menu down here. There's a dollar menu at just about every other McDonald's around, not in Santa Fe. So what you've done now is you've conceivably taken the dollar menu and made it a $2 menu because you've raised the minimum wage.
Let me ask you this. Union people would say this, Senator Feldman, that when you have a strong union state with good wages, it affects everyone's wages and drives them up. Is not the same premise about the minimum wage as well? Wouldn't that be better for
Rising
everybody?
tide lifts all boats.
Sure.
Would
you agree with that?
But also the unions are not exactly looking at this thing just from the minimum wage standpoint, because a lot of union contracts have it written in that if there is a bump in the minimum wage, everyone in the union, regardless whether they're at the lower end or in the middle end, get a raise.
Right.
And that's how the boat is lifted.
Right. Interesting. We're going to take a quick break with this group, and we'll be back in a moment to talk about what it should take to serve on the PRC.
Any one credit is not necessarily bad, but we haven't done a very good job of analyzing what each credit does as far as benefiting the state. Just giving a credit because you don't believe in taxes or you want to have low taxes for an industry, that may or may not be good policy, because that industry may actually consume more of state resources than some other industries. So we need to make sure that we're not giving credits where they're not appropriate.
The Public Regulation Commission is charged with setting utility rates, cab fares, a whole bunch of things. Very Byzantine, very odd. But it's important if a little geeky and boring. But after years of overturned rulings and scandals, more than 80% of voters last fall told lawmakers they want some qualifications for PRC commissioners. A measure making its way through the Senate would require an associate's, that's 2 years of course, degree, or the even tricky part, 7 years of experience, in the old finger quotes, in an industry related to the PRC. Now, a House bill currently would require a 4-year bachelor's degree or 7 years of experience. The question, Senator Feldman, to you, we're trying to get off the ground with something here to make this commission a little more professional and accountable. And the idea is, if you've made the commitment to finish your schooling, something comes along with you that's going to solve a bunch of different problems, including ethics, including a bunch of other things. Are we trying to solve too much here with this education thing?
Yes.
Okay.
We need to separate the whole ethical question from the experience and expertise question. You know, PRC Commission is a judicial body at points. It deals with some of the most complicated telecommunications issues, oil, gas, things that are pretty complicated. So I don't think it's unreasonable, and neither did 80% of the voters, that there be a better qualifications for this. But the devil is in the details.
Right.
And so, you know, should it be actual academic instruction in a general way, or should it be experience in a field that's related to the PRC? We don't want to limit too much the number of New Mexicans who can serve on the PRC, but on the other hand, we can't have a situation where 2/3, as Doug Howe has said, 2/3 of the decisions of the PRC that go to the Supreme Court are overturned.
You know, it's interesting, Dan, I heard that point, and Mr. Howe was strong in that testimony about that. And again, I have to ask, does that solve the problem if you walk in the door with a 4-year degree? Or what I want to know is, what entails the 7 years of experience? Because, as was mentioned, they're overlooking a rainbow of things. No one can have experience, literally, in all these categories. So, again, what are we solving here with doing this?
I find it interesting. You know, it just shows you the lack of forethought when they're drafting these bills. A college degree or a range of experience in industry. What if you served 12 years in the United States military? You're not qualified to come back and serve on the PRC? What if you were, you know, you spend 4 years as a
Just for the sake of argument, I'm
branch.
going to say no, just to see.
Well, I mean, I would say that, if you want to talk about being able to show up to work on time, being able to read manuals, follow rules, sit through a quasi-judicial experience, anybody that's ever been in the military does that continuously. You're constantly back. I mean, I would tell you right now, I think a 20-year-old coming back that every day had to get up and make a split life and death decision serving our country is as qualified as any high school kid after 4 years of college hanging out at UNM and having a great time. And so I think that it just shows you that you really can't draw a box to stick people in without excluding some. And I think the problem isn't so much that and I agree with Senator Feldman, we have to be careful about who we're excluding. We have no qualifications other than age to be President of the United States. No qualification to be, right, but I mean,
but isn't there an expectation, Dan, that when you think about this, you've got a commission and you've got a company doing business here, millions and millions of dollars, who have the ability to hire very good representation, very good lobbyists, standing up in front of that commission, making their case, and they're facing a group of folks with an associate's degree or less. Is that a fair fight for New Mexicans?
It's a totally fair fight. Because
why would that be a fair fight? Isn't that advantage to the company?
It's not at all. What's an advantage to the company is the fact that the PRC has this ex parte communication deal between staff and commissioners. Commissioners can't talk to staff. Staff doesn't work for the commissioners. Staff kind of works for itself. Right. I mean, this thing is easily fixed, I believe, and it doesn't have anything to do with qualifications. And we could talk about the ethics stuff later. The staff should work for the PRC commissioners. When you have an issue before the PRC, the New Mexico Constitution is very clear what the job of the Attorney General of this state is. It's to defend the people of this state. If there's an issue before the PRC that the citizens as a whole feel they're going to be damaged by, it's the Attorney General's job and his attorneys to present a case on behalf of the citizens. Let the PRC and its staff work together to come up with that decision. You're not going to fix any of that if everybody has to have a PhD in astrophysics to serve on the PRC and you still have this barrier between communication. It ain't going to work.
Rob, would you agree with that premise?
No, I would defer to Mr. Howe. I covered a number of PRC meetings, and he was one of the most impressive PRC members I saw. And in a very short period of time, you could see all the other PRC members deferring to him. So I would take a lot of what he has to say to heart. And he says possibly the most important thing is qualifications. I mean, this is a commission that has so much influence with so many different things. Yes, maybe someone who wants more qualifications could be accused of being elitist. Well, call me an elitist because it's clear that the PRC ain't working the way it's working.
Isn't this what 80% of the voters asked for, Antoinette?
That's
well, and
right.
that's
something. We may not have voted for the details, Senator Phelps, but something.
But I think they voted because of the prior scandals at the PRC. I think they conflated it, and that's the unfortunate thing. And these qualifications aren't going to get to the issue of ethics.
Right.
I think better ethics training, and here I actually believe I agree with you. The PRC needs a staff. I mean, even judges who are you have to be very highly qualified to become a judge. You have a law clerk, you have a staff. And so whatever the qualifications are, I think they need a good staff.
Also, I think the staffing issue might add a little bit more heft to the idea of more qualifications, because you need someone who has some sort of background, some sort of technical expertise. If there is a problem with staff ex parte communications, I think that only adds to the argument that let's have more qualifications.
Let me bounce back to Antoinette for a quick second.
Okay.
I have another question. Senator Keller made the point that if I get this right here, and I will, that would require disenfranchise half of our state.
Well, and that's,
would you buy that premise as well?
I'm not sure how many it would disenfranchise, but the thing is it is an elected position, and they're necessarily political. And so if you look at the PRC and what they campaign for, it's not I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm the most educated. They talk about what they're going to do for consumers, and that's what voters should be looking at.
It'd be interesting to see Commissioner Howe, who lost an election. It'd be interesting to see.
No, he didn't run.
Okay, well, it'd be interesting to see.
He was appointed but did not run.
It'd be interesting to see what districts, the current qualifications of the people they elected are versus how they voted on that issue right there. Did the PRC District 3 overwhelmingly vote we want this, and they got a guy with a 5th grade education up there? Did they elect that person over someone that had greater qualifications?
I just don't see the problem of having some minimal qualifications.
I do.
You know, if it's work experience or a degree, that's fine. I just don't see the problem.
Well, we have it for judges. You know, we have it for judges, and I think there's a parallel there.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want people who are not lawyers sitting in judgment and interpreting New Mexico law.
Let me turn this around a little bit and talk about business. If you're looking at New Mexico from outside the state, you're looking at different states to park your business in. New Mexico is one of them. Is it not a deficit, Antoinette, on our side of the ledger to say, look, you know, we may not be as vigorous on this part of it as other states? That might be to your advantage. To my mind, the people that would take advantage of this are people who come here to do no good, it seems to me. If you've got a commission who don't have the experience, don't have the education, don't have anything else to backstop us, it puts us at a disadvantage, it seems to me. That's a crazy premise, but I just want to see where you might be at on that.
I hadn't thought about that. Again, I've always seen when you have an elected position, as opposed to an appointed position, or, I mean, because you could change the whole structure. You could make this an appointed position, and then you could have some qualifications.
We have it as an appointed position.
Right, you could have that. But elected positions, to me, are political. And so they're going to campaign on issues, not, I mean, they will talk about, you know, whether they're qualified, they'll tout if they have a degree, and that means something. I do think a degree means that they've been taught critical thinking, critical reading skills, I say as an educator.
Sure.
But I'm not, I don't know, for me, as long as it's political, it's in a democracy, it's open.
You think about the last race that Al Park lost, the PRC seat. All those people were educated. They're all certainly competent.
Except for the winner.
Except for the winner. That's exactly right. It was very interesting, right?
It was against the PRC higher PRC qualification.
That's right.
She was against it. She was running because she didn't qualify. Right. I mean, that doesn't. I mean, that's. I just.
It's not a put down of her, Dan.
No,
it's just,
not
it's
at all.
just emblematic
I'm not
of
saying
what's
it's
going
a put down
on.
of her. I'm saying that, look, New Mexico is a state. You know, this would be one conversation if we lived in, you know, Northern California, where 80% of the population has a college degree or higher. We're in a state where it'd be interesting to see what our numbers for higher education are.
Why are we playing to the home crowd? This is my point. We're in a global economy.
Gene, because you're electing people. You're not electing people on a global scale.
If your regulatory body is not up to speed on how the rest of the world is working,
Gene,
you're assuming
that
puts us at a disadvantage.
You're wrong on that, Gene. You're assuming that just because some person didn't spend 6 years in college pursuing a master's degree or 15 years working for a construction company, that they're not qualified to be on their PRC. And I say you're wrong. I say there's a lot of good New Mexicans out there that want these jobs.
Dan.
I think there's lots of good New Mexicans out there.
We got to wrap up.
But the last thing is, one thing we've excluded from this whole conversation, what I brought up from me earlier, nobody in Santa Fe is saying that you could be qualified to serve in the PRC after an honorable discharge of 4, 6, 8 years in the United States military. And I would tell you that they're just as qualified as some people with a college degree.
There you go. Look, a lot of people would love to come sit at this table and be on this show. They can't, because it's a professional line to everything in life. There just is. It's just how these things go. Now, after the break, courting and recording Hollywood.